Hello, I'm creating this recording to clarify the difference between VSCode versus Visual Studio in the context of C++ programming. Now, VSCode is an IDE, but Visual Studio 2019 or the latest, which is 2022, is a fully integrated containing the compiler and the debugger. The VS Code, on the other hand, is just an IDE, and right now it is being installed in my Ubuntu OS. In order for this IDE to be usable for C++ debugging, you would need external compilers such as G++ and debugger GDB existing within your operating system. But the way that the IDE and this external compiler and debugger is integrated is a little bit confusing for those who are not familiar how Linux works and the way of the Linux ecosystem. Especially the Windows toolings are tightly integrated. You just run the app and everything works. However, in the Linux world, there are manual stitchings that you need to do, and that is why this video is for C++ developers who wanted to continue doing C++ in their Linux laptops. Although I have to re-emphasize again that for mission critical C++ development, I mean serious C++ programming, can only be done in Visual Studio under a Windows operating system. But make no mistake that I loved to use the mouse. In fact, I have my favorite setup is just booting to the kernel and the bash shell and with the most minimal processes running in order to save the battery life. And if I launch a browser, I launch from the command line. If I launch a video player, I launch from the command line. And if the session exits, I go back to the command line, preserving the most minimal running processes to save battery life. Okay? I do not like to use the mouse, but I like to use the mouse when it feels productive, like when you are doing 3D modeling in CAD, you have to use the mouse. This is the same story as for C++ programming. Now, the developer community has been requesting a lot to port Visual Studio 2019 over to the Linux environment. But it's not just Microsoft is not just there yet. Instead, what Microsoft gave is a bastardized version of Visual Studio, which is VS Code. It is a bastardized version, guys. They are not the same. If you ask me how are they close, it's like one in a million. So they are not the same. Okay, but still, I am very thankful of the existence of VS Code because now I can also do C++ programming in Linux. Let us begin. Create a directory xxx. Go inside the directory. Now that you're inside the directory, launch the VS Code from here. Type code dot, specify dot so that to tell VS Code that this is the current directory. Now VS Code, yes, I trust launch. Add a file, main.cpp. Start the incantation. Done. Incantation is done. Save it. exit. What now? What happens? What just happened there? We just have a file. Okay. So VSCode is just an IDE. Now I'll open the code again. Okay. Let me add some include so save. Okay. It is just an IDE, and now this is the content of the file. Let me put a breakpoint. Now let me start to debug this. For those Visual Studio veterans out, F5 is the debugging debugging key. I'll press F5 now. See, we can see the pop-up. We are now about to configure VS Code so that it will interact with the operating system as I have showed a while ago. It will try to search for an existing compiler, the GCC, and a debugger, GDB. Choose this one. Now, I could not possibly explain all the possible combinations there. You have to ask Microsoft about it, but choose this one. And as we can see, we are now in debugging mode. Hallelujah. Stop. Let's try to see if it really works. I'll press F10 now. When debugging, I pressed F5, and when stepping to the code, F10. So you can see that the hello is printed here. Very nice, very cute. And 0, 1, and 2. And it's done. Stop. So now we have the feeling that we have a nice, cozy, you know, Visual Studio like cozy feeling when doing C++ in a Linux environment. But let me tell you, this IDE that we've got here is far, far from what the Visual Studio 2019 or 2022 running in the Windows operating system gives you. Okay? Light years far. But you see, because we can see the variables, I'll press F5 again, and you can see the nice thing here like see, there's a cute eye here, and if we and now the eye even incremented is very cute, like it's like okay, it's enough for debugging. And a lot of questions that pops up in the whatever internet is how to add a new file and to work with this code. Okay, this is the trick. Just click the add a new file, add them, cpp, and return the SAM, right? And go back to main. And of course, if you are a decent C++ programmer, you have to declare the signatures of that function, right? Because we're not including a header file, we just put the signatures there so that it can be resolved in the invocation here. There. Let me press F5 again. What the fuck? Okay, let's open the launch.json. What the fuck? This is where the rubber meets the road. The VSCode is actually not an integrated IDE, but it can be integrated. But of course, you need to make it integrate. Okay, the way the VSCode did not see the add-on. It has no idea what this file is. So you have to open test.json and look and behold, this stuff here for those Windows veterans and gurus. When you move over to the Linux world, you have to respect the Linux compiler, the GCC. If you know this, okay, man GCC, okay, pay your respects to the GCC, okay. When you did your, after paying respects to GCC, all of the configuration JSON here will make sense to you, okay. That's the conclusion. So, without further ado, I'll just have to specify add num here. And if you pay your respect to the GCC compiler, you will be able to grok why I did that. Alright, so take your time, Windows friends, I know, com and .NET guys. Take your time to pay respects to the Linux world. I know, it, it hurts, but that is Linux guys. Go back to main, press F5. Now we were able to step through and made a complete debugging session. Okay, so now we can add more files from here and make a full-blown large C++ application using VSCode. Let me exit this IDE, and we can see that the add num, the newly added file, but hidden here is a VSCode folder. Okay, and within those VSCode folder, mhm, so this JSON is the mechanism to stitch a minimalistic IDE such as VS Code, to stitch it and to let it communicate to the operating system, which is Ubuntu right here, in order that it can find the compiler and the debugger running on the operating. So the compiler and the debugger is not owned by the VS Code. This IDE needs to be connected to the in order for them to talk. Now, if you are using Visual Studio 2019, 2022 in Windows operating system, you don't need to deal with this shit. Everything is there. But thank you, Microsoft, for bringing us VS Code to Linux so that we can continue our C++ and still keep the cozy feeling, cozy feeling of doing C++ in Ubuntu. But for serious C++ programming, you have to use a Windows operating system and you have to use the Visual Studio IDE, either the 2019 or the 2022 Community Edition. I'm not, if you don't believe me, the creator of Doom John Carmack. Listen to him. He can vouch for the Visual Studio Code. Okay, that's it. The confusion is over.